All right, welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here. You can watch or listen in on RT.ie, Apple, Spotify, the RT Sport YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. Ex-Sheffield Wednesday, UCD and Shamrock Rovers midfielder Paul Corry, former Ireland, Blackburn and Burnley winger Keith Treacy, Sky Sports reporter Joe Rawson and Slovakian football journalist Lukas Vrablik are our guests this week as we talk all things Euro 2024, plus we'll talk LOI related matters later on. I was speaking to Lukas on Sunday about Group E and Group F, so we'll bring you that chat later on. But first off, hello to Keith, Paul, and Joe. Hope you're all keeping well.
Oh, good, Rafi.
Yeah, all
And
good.
yeah, and let's start on the devastation, I suppose, with when it comes to Scotland. They bow out of a group stage or the opening round of a tournament for the 12th time and still yet to reach the knockout stage of a major tournament in their entire history. And so this is off the back of losing 1-0 to Hungary last night in Stuttgart, and also in the other group game, Switzerland and Germany drawing 1-1. And Joe, you were at the game. You were at the game last night, and what was the mood, I suppose, in the stadium? Because there was a sense maybe of anticipation building for Scotland, given that they'd got that draw against Switzerland that gave them a chance, and it's been punctured, and right at the very end of the game as well.
Yeah, I mean, before the match kicked off, they were very confident, the Tartan Army, because Hungary haven't been great in the tournament up until, well, I don't think they were great last night. Let's not polish it. It was a terrible game, I think, in terms of quality. So, yeah, the Scottish fans were very confident. But then as we got to half time, there was a bit of a air of, they're not really doing much in the final third. And by full time, I tried to speak to a couple of on their way out to the ground. And, yeah, they didn't want to talk to an Englishman asking them questions about Scotland, as you can imagine. So disappointing, and I think it's just the fact that they didn't have a shot on target until injury time. That disappointment, even though Steve Clarke did try to change things with about 20 minutes to go. I think Shankland created more of a threat in behind for them. They didn't create any clear opportunities. I can't remember their goalkeeper making a save. And there's the controversy over the shout with Stuart Armstrong, but I kind of feel if we're arguing over a VAR decision, then Scotland didn't do enough to win it. That's the massive disappointment for the Tartan Army, and I imagine Steve Clarke and the squad of players as well.
Yeah, because Paul, I suppose, looking at the way the Scottish performed, they had quite a lot of possession, especially earlier on in the game, but they weren't particularly direct with it. And I know maybe they lack a bit of power with Che Adams up front. It's probably the weakest area of the squad, but that would be the biggest disappointment. They didn't take the game by the scruff of the neck, and that's no disrespect to Hungary, who are a very good team.
I couldn't believe how Hungary actually set up, Raf, and the fact that they sat off Scotland so much and actually conceded the majority of possession and just let Scotland have it. I think when Steve Clarke and his background team reflect on it, I think they'll be very disappointed with the lack of penetration that they actually had. A lot of the time, it seemed to go to McGregor, to Gilmore, and then back to the back three, and they offered no sort of threat in wide areas. They were really crying out for somebody. I thought like a James Forrest come off the bench and just be a little more direct and at least try to get balls in the box, because they weren't able to play through Hungary at all. And the fact that they failed to have a shot on target is very indicative of how their performance went. So yeah, I thought kind of like when there was so much on the line and there was two teams both knowing that they needed to win, it really lacked a huge amount of quality throughout the 90 minutes. And I think Scotland will regret not going at Hungary a little more over the course of those 90 minutes. So much possession, so many passes, but failed to do anything with the ball. And we saw Hungary play here in Dublin before they headed out to the competition. I thought they were a weak side. I really, really did. And it was certainly an opportunity that Scotland will reflect on and think we had a really good chance there. Maybe some personnel changes and the fact that they were out the likes of Lyndon Dykes and Tierney, maybe that hampered them a small bit, but I just felt over the course of 90 minutes there wasn't enough punch in any of their play, not enough penetration to really cause Hungary enough problems.
Yeah, and then Keith on the penalty shout. Steve Clarke is incensed by it, and he wants answers in regards to why it wasn't given. So this is Stuart Armstrong running through, falling in the box under pressure from Willie Orban, and the referee he waved it away, and then VAR didn't intervene. So where do you stand on it, having looked at it a few times and at the replays as well?
I think it's a penalty, Raf. I can't see how it's not given. Initially, as the ball is played through, I thought Armstrong might be offside, but I think if he was offside, VAR would have come back and just told us, listen, it was a penalty, but the offside has happened, so we're not going to bother with the penalty. But they haven't said that. They just said straight up it's not a penalty, which for me is crazy stuff. Stuart Armstrong is in front of him. He puts the brakes on. I take that point, but Orban's knee goes flying into the back of his calf, takes his leg away from him. And I don't know how any football man can look at replays of that. Football man, football woman can look at that and think it's not a penalty, because it is. It's all day long a penalty for me. And, you know, I'd be a little bit different to Joe to think that, you know, Scotland went to Germany, played against Germany, got battered. You can throw that game away. They're so good, you know, probably going to go close to winning the tournament. They go and get a brilliant draw against Switzerland. Now they've got themselves into the position they wanted to be in, up against Hungary. Right, they weren't open and expansive, but I don't think it was never going to be like that. It was always going to be a really tight game that a set piece, a penalty, a mistake was going to decide the game. And I think that was it right there in a nutshell. I think if Scotland go on and get that penalty and score, I think they keep their noses in front and Hungary go on and get beat. But yeah, you could say they didn't do enough, but Hungary are a very, very good team. You know, look at Szoboszlai is going to be there for a long time. Kerkez, the left back, who's at Bournemouth at the minute, very young boy as well. He's going to be there for an awful long time. Willie Orban's at Leipzig as well. Salah's at Freiburg. So this Hungary team, you know, I've seen them in Aviva a couple of weeks ago, and you are very, very poor. They've been underwhelming in this tournament, to say the least. But on paper, they're a very good team, and the Scottish, there's no disgrace in it whatsoever. They got it into the home straight. They start throwing the dice a little bit, and they got hit by a sucker punch, but generally, I think that's all the Scottish fans could have really asked for, is to get it into the Hungary game, start throwing a few punches and try and win it. And they did try and win it in the last 15, 20 minutes. They just got that horrible, horrible sucker punch. And, you know, I think it's a penalty, Raf. I think it's a penalty all day long. I think the result of the game changes if the referee gives it. And I heard Steve Clarke saying after the game, it's strange that we had an Argentinian referee in the Euros. Maybe if we had a European referee, it would have been a bit different. I'm not too sure about any of that. You know, I don't think it matters what nationality you are. I think if the referee doesn't see it in real time, that's no problem. But the 3 or 4 people that are up in the VAR have to twig it and go, it's a penalty, has to be given. So I don't think nationality has anything to do with it. I just think it's a wrong decision, and Scotland have paid the price.
Yeah, it's a funny one, Raf, because I kind of see it the other way around. I thought it would have been given live and the referee would have pointed to the spot, but I actually think when I looked at it back, I could kind of see why VAR didn't give it. I thought Stuart Armstrong was absolutely trying to buy it, and Keith is dead on. Like, he slowed up and waited for the contact, but I actually thought he almost pulled the Hungarian defender around with him and bought it a little too much, whereas I couldn't really understand why he just didn't try to get a shot away. Like, he was what, 10 yards out from goal, straight through. So I thought the referee was going to give it, but I can kind of understand then why VAR haven't.
Yeah, I think for people who want to watch the decision back, if you go to the RTÉ Sport YouTube channel, or also to rte.ie/sport, the video section, the different angles of the penalty non-award, you can watch it. You can watch it there, as well as highlights of both of last night's games and all the previous ones as well. Now, Joe, I suppose a final point on Scotland. Like, we know, obviously, Hungary, whether they stay in the competition or not, it's really on a knife edge for them. They're on 3 points, and it's going to be dependent now on the permutations of the other groups. But for Scotland, Steve Clarke in the future, he has a contract until 2026. But sometimes we know major tournaments can, they can be a tipping point for certain, national team setups. Where do you see them going in the future in terms of the manager, and also their chances of qualifying for the next major tournament in America, Mexico, and Canada?
Well, I think they should stick with Steve Clarke. Remember, before he was appointed, Scotland hadn't qualified for a major since France 1998. So I think for him to get them to back-to-back European Championships, I think that's a great achievement. I heard David Moyes, who a lot of the fans actually were saying, "Oh, we want Moyesy on the way out of the stadium." He was pretty adamant that he's going to take a break after leaving West Ham. It's who they would bring in. We know that the Scottish FA aren't flush with money, similar to the Irish FA, and so a track name on a small salary it is difficult compared to the sort of money they can earn even at Championship level or Championship and Premier League level. So I think if Clark wants to stay, I think he is the right man to lead them forward, and criticise at times some of the negative tactics, but he doesn't have that many options in terms of strikers, does he? Particularly in this tournament with the injuries that they've had. They are crying out for a goal scorer. They're crying out for a world-class player, but they don't really have that at the moment. So I think the Scottish FA will stick with Clark. It'll be dependent on what Steve Clark wants to do, I think.
Yeah, and as for Germany, Paul, a lot of people won't have seen it because it was the other simultaneous game. So it was on the RT News channel last night. I was keeping an eye on sort of both of them, so I caught a little bit of it. But it's their first stumble in the tournament, 1-1 draw with the Swiss, and going into the last 16 now, Jonathan Tah, the centre back, he is suspended, and then Antonio Rudiger is carrying a bit of a thigh problem, might be fit, but there's a few little, I suppose, storm clouds there for them and for Julian Nagelsmann to deal with.
Yeah, there was probably a couple of frailties within the German back four in particular that we haven't seen in the first two games. And the Swiss are very strong and dynamic when they go forward, and they seem to cause them a couple of problems, and they won the ball high up the pitch for their goal as well. So I'm sure there's a couple of tweaks, and there'll be a couple of instances that Nagelsmann will want to look back on and maybe look at how they can kind of just avoid those sort of mistakes moving into the last 16. But Tah is probably a little bit of an issue because himself and Rudiger, the foundation they give that German side to play with, there's so much aggression and there's so much power in that back four that has probably eliminated any sort of threat that they could have had in previous games. It'd be interesting to see Schlotterbeck, who I thought was absolutely brilliant for Borussia Dortmund in that Champions League run. The stories are that he probably hasn't brought that sort of form into a German jersey. So it'll be interesting to see if he does slot in beside Rudiger, what sort of change that's going to have to the Germans and how they go forward. But I guess you can probably give them a bit of a pass last night, knowing that they were already qualified out of that group. They got the job done and got their draw and ensured that they finished top of the group. They certainly have options off the bench. Raf, Fulkrug has done particularly well when he's come in and probably offers something a little more different to Havertz. Havertz is brilliant in the sense that he'll run the channels and he'll probably create spaces like Gundogan and Musiala. But Fulkrug, as a out-and-out number 9 to link play off, he was brilliant in the Champions League, and his form in front of goal, the goal that he scored against Scotland and the header last night, he is certainly somebody that Germany might look to as this tournament goes on. So I'm not sure they'll look too much into performance and the result from last night, but there probably will be instances, like I mentioned, particularly with that back four, that you would just want to, look to have a little more solid as they advance into this competition.
When I arrived here, very little fanfare around Germany's chances of having a good run here, maybe winning it, particularly with the public. But that performance against Scotland and then in the group stages, getting through comfortably, there is that belief within the general public, and you can feel sort of the Euros atmosphere building in Germany that wasn't there a day or so before it started. So, being the host, I think that can give a nation a huge boost, particularly when there is the belief. And that's what Germany as a nation has now. So, that might be able to carry them over the lines in tight games. We've seen it enough in tournaments.
Yeah, and certainly 2006 is probably the most representative tournament in terms of how they did that. An unfancy team that really revitalized German football, and they got to a semi-final and then went to bigger and better things after that. Now, tonight's games are going to be simultaneously on RT2 and the RT News channel, and both on the RT Player. So that's Croatia against Italy, Albania against Spain, both kicking off at 8 o'clock. And if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, you'll see details on the coverage times and just graphics there if you just need to check that out. Now, Spain are through, Keith, and now I think the more interesting game is this aging Croatia team and whether they have any gas left in the tank against what is, and from what we saw in the Spain game, a very ordinary Italy team.
Yeah, both teams that are yet to convince anybody really that they've razor sharp up front. But I'm not too sure about the whole Croatia thing. I know they're getting older every year. I feel like I've been saying it the last 10 years about Modric. He just keeps going and going. But I do think it'll be won and lost in the middle today with Modric and Kovacic, Krisanti and Barella. It's a must win for Croatia. I don't think their group has been as bad as people have made out. I know it's an extremely tough group. It was the sucker punch against Albania that's really hurt them. Otherwise, they're sitting here on 3 points and they're thinking if they can draw with the Italians, they'll be fine. They'll go through. As it is, they drew against Albania. Now this becomes a must win. So I wouldn't be surprised if Croatia do go and eke out a 1-0 win and, end up in the semi-finals of the World Cup somehow, just end up getting themselves there. It's been less than convincing. I take that on board. But, with Kramaric, I don't think Budimir up front is up to too much. But they definitely have an awful lot about them. But the Chiesa is the one for me. If you're putting your hopes on the Italians, I don't think they have too much up front. I like Barella, I like Tresanti, but Chiesa is the little bit of stardust for me that, if they're going to do something on the wing, he's the one that's going to create the spark. So I do think if Croatia can keep Chiesa in particular quiet, if they win the midfield battle, Modric and Kovacic on Cristante and Barella, I think they'll win. I think Croatia will go and win the game, but the indicators over the last 2 games are that a lot of them have gone over the top of the hill. Luka Modric is walking out of press conferences when he's been asked maybe some of the younger players should be playing. It's just not, Modric generally just takes these type of things and walks off. Nothing ever seems to bother him, but he seems to be getting annoyed now, and we'll either see a reaction or we'll see a player that I think it was put a couple of weeks ago, leave football before football leaves you. I think Modric is a million miles away from that, but maybe at the elite level, maybe he's just come off the boil ever so slightly, and Croatia are feeling it.
Yeah, now before we look at Group C and Group D, which obviously contain some other big hitters, let's have a look at Group E and F with Slovakian football journalist Lukas Vrablik, who was speaking to me from Dusseldorf on Sunday. On Wednesday, Ukraine versus Belgium will be on RT2 and RT Player at 4:30, with Slovakia against Romania on the news channel from 4:50 p.m. Then Czechia against Turkey on RT2 and the RT Player at 7:30, with Georgia against Portugal at 7:50 on the RT news channel. But first thing I spoke to Lukas about was how finely poised Group E is, with Belgium, his native Slovakia, Ukraine and Romania all on 3 points.
It's fascinating, really. Many people thought that probably Belgium is going to have an easy ride, during that group stage. And it's been great that Slovakia beat them in the first game. I'm kind of biased as well, of course, because I'm Slovakian, but I think it just made the group more exciting. And of course, not many people, I guess, expected Romania to win against the Ukraine. So it made things very, very complicated. It's been, it's really great group. I guess the most interesting one at the moment, because everyone can advance, and it looks like that in the third game, if Slovakia draw against Romania 0-0, basically both teams go through. So that's not really a good news for UEFA 24 team system, let's say, even if I'm a big fan of that. But all 4 teams are really, really great. I love watching Slovak team right now. Romania play fascinating football. Ukraine had a big problem in the first game, but they played really well against Slovakia. So let's see what happens in those last 2 games.
Sure, yeah, and as you said, Slovakia, you're kind of biased on that front, given it's your home country, and I don't think anybody. I think coming into their first game, I guess nobody would have put any expectation on them beating Belgium, but they did it, and they play a fascinating football. You might explain it to us. There's a Napoli template to the way they approach it, and of course, Napoli last season, or the season before last, one should say, champions of Italy. The Slovakian manager has a strong connection to Napoli, and also your playmaker also has a huge connection to Napoli as well.
Yeah, it's a long story. To make it very simple, 2 years ago, basically Slovakia tried to find a new coach, and they didn't have much money. So basically they tried to find some innovative option. And that was a time when Marek Hamšík, former midfielder for the Slovak national team, came to the Football Federation and suggested Francesco Calzona. Nobody knew him in Slovakia, and even when I asked my Italian friends among media, they didn't have much information about him. It was crazy to do the research on the internet, because there were maybe 2 interviews with Francesco Calzona in the Italian media over the last 15 years. So he has never been a head coach in his life before taking over Slovakia, but he's one of the masterminds behind Sarrismo, Maurizio Sarri coaching style, which was also implemented at Chelsea a couple of years ago. So Calzona was his long-year assistant. And the midfielder Marek Hamšík came to Slovakia and suggested Calzona, and they had meetings with him. And they were successful. In the end, they set up a new contract with Slovakia. They signed it, and there was a big backlash in Slovakia against this appointment, because when you look at his Wikipedia page, there is a clear sign that he has never been a head coach anywhere, and suddenly he's a national team coach, which led to criticism from Slovak fans, some Slovak former players as well. They were talking about some kind of, that he's like Marek Hamšík's appointment, even if he doesn't have like any official role with the Football Federation, didn't have back then, as his assistant coach to Calzona right now. So there was a big backlash, and also it came from the fact that Slovakia didn't have foreign coach before, and like people in Slovakia don't like new things. The society isn't so cosmopolitan and open, so it was an interesting appointment in that regard as well. But he came to Slovakia, and he made a great change of the team, like when it comes to playing style, tactics. Suddenly, like Slovakia, if you remember them for example from previous tournaments, they always parked the bus somehow and tried to get result. But as you can see against Belgium, there was no coincidence that they played so adventurously. They had high pressing. They play out from the back, even if they made some mistake, like the goalkeeper Dubravka. Like he probably gave 2 passes to Romelu Lukaku basically, and they didn't score from that. And the other team would just start playing it long and try to get rid of the ball, but no, Slovakia continued playing out from the back. So that's a big difference, and I think that this is a big change about this tournament, that a lot of small teams are trying to do this. It's like that with Georgia, for example, Albania, even if they were not that much successful when it comes to results. So it's really like a great approach. It's like the teams want to attack, and that's great news for football fans. And of course, Slovakia has a big advantage that they have a playmaker, not really a playmaker, he's number 6, Stanislav Lobotka, but he is really like Rodri at Manchester City. Like he can break through the lines, and he has great overview of the pitch. And that's a big change with Slovakia, that the players now want the ball. And I think that Francesco Calzona, the coach, made the great use of those players that he had at his disposal, because he couldn't really change half of the team. We don't have better players than those who are already at the team, but the system wasn't working for a couple of years now. It's working, even if the results are not always victories, but it's working. So that's probably, even if a long answer, but I tried to put it as simple as possible.
Okay, sure. And of course, as you said, a draw for Romania and Slovakia on Wednesday would be enough for both teams to go through. Of course, Romania have the advantage in terms of goal difference from beating Ukraine 3-0 in their first game. It's going to be a fascinating contest because Romania are defensively very sound, as we saw in the qualifiers. Yes, Belgium scored a couple of goals, and Lukaku again had another goal marginally ruled out. But that's going to be a fascinating game, I suppose, between the Slovakian approach and the contrast with how Romania defend and counterattack.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of similarities between the teams because I watched Romania actually during the qualifying, and I also was in Romania at not the national team games but league games just 1 year ago, and the football culture there is quite strong. I was surprised by that. Like there are thousands of people at the league games. They love football. There is a big potential, and it's similar as with Slovakia, that they kind of created a game system which works. And yeah, you could see that. I think also in Belgium game when they lost, but especially against Ukraine, they have a lot of good offensive players as well. But the defense, it's really they are a big strength. And it will be a very hard game for Slovakia. Like, people think that they are not as good, but I think that football fans will really understand football can see that it's a great team as well. I know some of the players, like Stanchu has been really great. He played in Czech league for both Sparta and Slavia, which was kind of story to transfer between two rivals, but he has been really like a creative mastermind of the team, and really good. Otherwise, yeah, there is Dennis Mann, who is a great player. They have a lot of good players in the defense. They are not like big individuals who are kind of like X factors in the team, but they have a lot of quality. And even if people like don't really know them abroad, outside of Romania, I think that the team is really strong, and mentality is also great. They have shown that in the qualifiers, and it's also like the change they have made like over the last 1 or 2 years. It hasn't really happened overnight, but when you compare it from the situation like 2 years ago, they were not able to beat teams which were kind of like weaker on paper. Now they have done it, and they can like play against any side in Europe right now. As you could see that with Belgium. Okay, Belgium probably isn't as strong as many people thought before the tournament, but still Romania played a great game against them.
Yeah, and in terms of Belgium, I mean, a lot of people, I think there was maybe a slight overreaction to the first game against Slovakia, because it's not that they didn't play badly. The result is bad. The performance actually wasn't as bad as what it looked like in terms of the result. But Tedesco made 4 changes last night for the win against Romania, and of course they won 2-0. Kevin De Bruyne scores the last goal. But some of the tweaks seem to work. You might talk us through them, because it's mostly defensively Vertonghen coming in, and a defensive Piatti on the left side of in left back as well also helped, as well as the man who scored the first goal.
Yeah, I mean, Belgium are really strong still. They can make some result in this tournament. They have great individuals. They were unlucky against Slovakia, we have to say. Even if Slovakia played really well, they have like 2 disallowed goals, a lot of like missed chances. Like Lukaku is probably the unluckiest player at the tournament right now with 3 goals disallowed. So I think there is a still a big space for Belgium to do something at this tournament. Even if I don't really expect them to do so well, I think that kind of like quarterfinals is a realistic one for them. But you never know at the final tournaments. They have a lot of like good young players as well, like with Bakayoko or Onana has been really great against Slovakia, in my opinion. And even it was really funny to hear him in the mix zone in the video, which went viral, because I was right there, and one journalist like wanted to ask him the question, and he used name Andre. So that was kind of funny for me, but but yeah, not funny for Amadou, who wasn't really in great mood after the loss. So yeah, it's been I think that Belgium team is still really strong. Tedesco has been like continuing in kind of a generation change, which is important for Belgium. A lot of young players coming in. I think Trossard is really dangerous on the left wing. Doku, of course, also with his speed. And I still think that Kevin De Bruyne can really play a major role in this tournament, because the pace is a little bit slower, in my opinion, than in Premier League or Champions League games. And I think that this international football can suit him really well. So I think there is a big potential with Belgium side. They just need to take their chances and not waste them. And that's the difference maker here.
Yeah, and of course they play Ukraine in their final group game also on Wednesday, and of course every match live on RTÉ as well. If we switch focus to Group F, so Portugal, a little bit unimpressive in the first game against Czechia, but they also made changes, and it was more structural and formation wise, and it seemed to click. And also there was the surprise of Cristiano Ronaldo, when he's bearing down on goal, not shooting himself and actually passing to Bruno Fernandes, which I think has taken everyone by surprise. And they seem to be in a better vibe now. Roberto Martinez, though, still a bit uncertain in terms of whether he's going to be an impediment as a manager, because he's his reputation, like he has a good reputation, but of course there's a sense even with Belgium he didn't get the most out of that generation.
Yeah, no, I was at the game yesterday in Dortmund before for Turkey Portugal, and yeah, it's been fascinating to see because Dortmund was basically taken over by Turkey supporters. Um, uh, there, there is a big, of course, Turkish heritage population in Dortmund, so many people were locals, and I was also at first Turkey game there, and the atmosphere was brilliant in Borussia Stadium. And suddenly, Portugal game, it was similar from the start. There was high intensity from Turkey, and suddenly after the first two goals, like the stadium went silent, and there were, I think, like 60,000 Turkish supporters, only 20,000 Portuguese, but still you could hear only Portuguese fans later on. So it was kind of like they really dominated that game, and I think it's a clear sign that they really learned something from the Czech game, because the Czech game wasn't really good from Portugal, even if they won that one. But now I think there is a better structure that team, and also there was Ruben Neves in the mix zone, and he just saying the same thing. Like they prepared better for this second game than they did against Czech Republic. They had a better feeling, and even if they won 3-0, he said something like it was almost a fake result, because it wasn't that clear from Portugal, and they still had trouble to break through that Turkish system. So, but I think that to me, they looked really effective, and they are for sure one of the biggest contenders for Euro triumph, because I think that the whole team like works very well. And yeah, there was always a question about how to use Cristiano Ronaldo, and that's a discussion that will go on and on and on and at every tournament. But it seems like they kind of like it clicks. It clicked in this game against Turkey, but still, like Turkey doesn't really have a good defense. But yeah, they Portugal managed to somehow like how to say, they created the system which works, and I think that Ronaldo is quite integral part of it. Let's see how it looks like in knockout stages when they face some high quality team like France or Spain or somebody like that. There, that's I think like kind of like big dilemma for Martinez, because if he leaves out like Ronaldo as Fernando Santos did at the World Cup, and they lose like against Morocco, then that's a big problem for Martinez. But at the same time, you try to keep your captain and like the biggest star in the team. So that's a big dilemma for Martinez, and I'm quite curious about what he will do. I don't know what's the best option, but you see many experts like saying like Ronaldo should be benched or whatever, but it's hard to do. It's kind of like big dilemma, I guess. So, but I think that the squad depth is really like amazing. Like so many midfielders. It's not just about like Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva, but also like Vitinha played a fascinating game yesterday. So I think that this side is really strong. It looks like just on the level of England and France when it comes to individual quality.
Yeah, obviously England in terms of individual quality, great, but in terms of collective, we haven't seen it yet. Obviously Portugal have Georgia next, and Georgia have been very plucky. But the final, the other group game that is taking place also at the same time, of course, Turkey knowing a draw against Czechia will be enough to go through on 4 points. You said Turkey's defense isn't great. I suppose on the Czechia point of view, they're very good at set pieces, but up front, Patrick Schick is a little bit of a doubt now, having picked up an injury against Georgia on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Czech they have their own problems. I think that the Czech problem right now is the lack of creativity in the midfield. They have just rely on Tomášek because he's no creator. He's number 8 who can join, the penalty box, but he cannot really like create a lot of chances. So that's a big problem for Czech Republic to find somebody like that, because when you compare it with other sides like Slovakia has like 2 creative players in central midfield. That's Lobotka and Ondrej Duda, but Czech Republic really like that. and Turkish team is quite strong on the counter attacks as well, which can make a problem for Czech Republic. Let's see if Arda Güler is fully fit, because he was benched for a Portugal game, as his fitness wasn't like 100%. But I think that Arda Güler is really the X factor in that team, so he can make big problems for Czechs. Let's see if they get a draw they need. Czech Republic still lives, although they still have a chance to go through. So that's gonna be a really interesting game. Patrick Schick, probably he isn't like in that kind of form as he was at the last Euros, as he was the top goal scorer. I think joined one with Ronaldo. So he's not in that kind of form. He was also benched for the most of the season at Bayer Leverkusen, but I still think like he's the number 9 that Czech Republic is relying on, and I think they will rely on him in the further years if he's healthy, because he had his own problems with injuries. And yeah, but by the way, that's a great point which I was talking about with a colleague of mine. Is that so many great number 9s at this tournament? Like even if they don't score the goals, like a couple of years back, we didn't have like so many good number 9s in Europe, and now when you look at those 24 teams, there is like almost in every team you find a good striker, which is fascinating with how the football tactics has evolved, and I'm really happy about that. There is that confirmation of good number 9 importance.
Yeah, and I suppose the final point before I let you go, obviously you're in Dusseldorf at the moment. You've mentioned you've been in Dortmund and so many places in the last week or so since the tournament has been ongoing. What's the atmosphere been like generally in Germany as you've been traveling around and taking it in? And I suppose in terms of the game, with the best atmosphere you've been at, which one has it been?
Oh, it's really hard to say, but I really loved my first game. Probably I'm biased by that because this is my first major tournament actually. But the first game between Italy and Albania was great because there were so many Albanians at Dortmund Stadium. Some of them like traveled by car from UK, and they paid like 400 or 500 euros for a ticket because they had to got the tickets. They had to get the tickets from Italian fans as a resale. So they paid like so much money for tickets that they couldn't afford the hotel, so they stayed sleeping in a car, or they just went camping or whatever. So that's crazy, and the passion to see that passion of Albanians, it was fascinating. But I have been to Balkans, so I just expected that. Turkey, Georgia has been great atmosphere because Georgia with a first major tournament appearance, it has like that special connection. It meant so much for the players. You could see that like. I was talking with Guram Kasia, the captain of Georgia, in May because he plays in Slovakia. So he was, really like looking forward to playing at Dortmund Stadium because that was a big dream of his. And also now with Georgia at the major tournament, that even added something more for that. And you could see that passion the players have for their own country. It sounds like a cliche, but with Georgian players, they are really like patriotic as I've never seen with another national team. Like for example, this captain Guram Kasia has a tattoo of the Saint George, who is a symbol of Georgia as a country. He has a big tattoo of him at his back. He told me that they love their country more than their own family. So it's funny, but at the same time it adds something like special to the international tournament. So that game was really good. Also, it was really exciting from point of view of football, and the atmosphere has been really great. I'm returning right now to Slovakia for a couple of days, and then coming back for knockout stages. But man, I just don't want to go home at this moment. It's just like so much vibes, and I feel on my emotional high with so much serotonin or whatever. But because like for example, today I just traveled to Düsseldorf by train, and there were like 10 German guys like dancing to some techno like in the train, and I was like, oh, this is really like vibes, you know. The atmosphere has been great. Like also like I have my childhood friends coming to here to Germany to watch some Slovakia games. So I went out went out in Cologne with them, so you can meet even like people from your own village here in Germany. So it's like so international. I had no problems. There was some transport issues due to overcrowding before England and Serbia game, and also like some attacks from hooligans, but it wasn't like anything serious. Otherwise, I think the organization is really top. Even if there are some minuses, for example, the train delays, which English press especially wrote about a lot. But I'm from Slovakia, so I'm used to train delays. so I was surprised that Wi-Fi was working on the train. So that was like a miracle for me, because that doesn't happen in Slovakia at all. So I think it's a great tournament so far. Great fan bases. Like from the fans, I would say that the best one for me was Turkish fans and Georgia fans and Albanian fans. But like all the fan bases has been really great. Like coming in big numbers, even from Slovakia, which doesn't happen. But in Frankfurt at Belgium game, there was probably 15,000 Slovaks. Former players in the stands, like Martin Škrtel from Liverpool in the national team shirt, like Slovak rappers are coming to watch the team. So it's really international. For example, I know that Albania, when they played their first game against Italy, their football federation invited all the former international players, like 200 of them, to be the guests at the stadium. So it was like a national event for Albania. So this just this just shows how much this means for the countries which are probably smaller, but I think they're just at that special edge to the tournament.
Yeah, I wish we'd qualified now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But anyway, look, enjoy the rest of the tournament. Obviously, you're a couple of days back in Slovakia as well, and thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, Raf, it's been a big pleasure. Thank you.
All right, that's Lukas Vrablik, Slovakian football journalist whose work has been published in the likes of The Guardian, BBC, and other publications as well. Now, turning to Group C and Group D. So, coverage details first, and these matches are taking place on Tuesday and all on the RTÉ player. So, Netherlands against Austria on RT2, coverage starts at 4:30, and France against Poland on the RT News channel at 10 to 5 is when that starts. And then England against Slovenia. This is the evening game, so 7:30 start on RT2, and then Denmark against Serbia on the news channel with coverage starting at 10 to 8. And Joe, I suppose for England, and it's not just maybe a coincidence that they're playing Slovenia in a final group game, but I'm getting vibes of the 2010 World Cup where they started off in a very uninspiring way in the group against Algeria and USA, and there was a lot of recriminations. I remember Wayne Rooney having a go at the sort of the fans and the media, but there is that vibe starting to grow with England at the moment after some unconvincing displays so far.
Yeah, we've heard Harry Kane have a bit of a go back at the media, in particular Gary Lineker, after comments he made about the striker and performance. I mean, there is issues in terms of balance, big issues with England. I think the left-hand side, the first two games I've been at, and when you're watching from high up in the stands, you get a good tactical view of how the team is set up, and there's been no threat on that left-hand side either. So I think I can see Phil Foden dropped for the game tomorrow against Slovenia. Whether Gareth Southgate decides to play Eze, I'd like to see Anthony Gordon play out there. He naturally plays on the left-hand side for Newcastle and he's more comfortable. Luke Shaw is training today, so the first time that he's been out on the grass. So if they can get him part fit, again, that'd be much better, having him on the left-hand side, though I do worry. I mean, Paul and Keith all know better than me about how difficult it is to come back having not had a match after months out. But surely it's going to be difficult for sure. And yeah, the midfield issue with Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think that experiment has got to end now from an England point of view. Who comes in? Personally, I'd like to see Bellingham play further back. And then you can play Cole Palmer or Foden in the number 10. But I have a feeling it's more likely to be Gallagher or Mainu or maybe Wharton. I think he'll go with Gallagher. Again, I'd probably prefer to see one of the two younger players because they're a bit more dynamic with their passing. Gallagher for me is more of a workhorse. But yeah, lots of issues with England. He's got such an array of talent, but you know, it's square pegs in round holes from me at the minute from Gareth Southgate, and it's clearly not worked so despite them getting the win and the draw, which means, they are through whatever the result against Slovenia.
Yeah, and Paul, that central midfield area, and you might be able to maybe just give us, I suppose, your insight, having played in that position yourself, but the Trent Alexander-Arnold experiment, as Joe said there, hasn't really worked at all. Obviously, he's got a great range of passing, but there's way more to midfield play than what you can just do on the ball with plenty of options to play through. Southgate has mentioned the fact that they don't have that balance of Calvin Phillips around, but Calvin Phillips hadn't played his way into form in terms of being involved in this tournament at all. And the knock-on effect that's happening on Declan Rice as well, because he was quite poor against Denmark and had a huge amount of space that he had to cover, and consequently didn't look world-class, even though I think James McLean is very clear he's not world-class in any case anyway.
Yeah, it's been difficult for Trent, hasn't it? I mean, playing in the middle of the park is something new, particularly within that England side, but I thought his actual distribution of the ball was really poor in the first half of that game against Denmark. I couldn't get over how many straight passes he hit, because when we've seen him for Liverpool in particular, he's usually deadly accurate over 5, 10, 20 yards. And it felt like the first couple of passes almost was going to lead into a poor performance from him. But I think looking at it, Raf, from a centre midfielder's perspective, it's very, very different starting as a right full and drifting into the middle of the pitch compared to starting in the middle of the pitch and trying to pick off angles from your two centre halves to receive the ball. Trent, when he plays as a fullback, always has the sideline behind him, so he has that knowledge of people not being behind him. When you go into the middle of the pitch, you have to be so aware with your wing mirrors on of pressure, of where it's coming from, and receiving the ball and then trying to distribute from there. So I have a huge amount of sympathy from him, just from a positional point of view, and the difficulty he would have from going from a right full to actually starting in the middle of the pitch. I don't think you can blame his performance then, though, on Declan Rice. I think Declan Rice was just off it in the last game. Failed to penetrate and play forward too many times. Way too safe with his passing and didn't look to kind of play into Bellingham and Foden into those forward positions. And you can probably excuse that. He's usually Mr. Consistency in an England jersey. And I would expect that he will probably get back to that in the next couple of games. But I would agree with Joe. I think Gallagher is likely to start. I think Southgate has probably been itching to get him into the team. It probably brings an energy to the play that maybe Trent doesn't. And, his ability to retrieve the ball is maybe something that appeals a lot to Southgate and probably gives him a little more solidity in the middle of the pitch than a Trent and a Rice. So yeah, it's a difficult one. I think there's pressure on this England performance to get it right, particularly in the final third, and to see a couple of combinations between Foden, Bellingham and Kane, depending on what personnel start. I don't think it's going to happen, to be honest with you. I don't think there's that same sort of fluidity in the English side that we've maybe seen in previous years, and they're not managing to get the most out of Saka and Foden in wide areas. So it's a tricky one for Southgate. They'll obviously get out of the group and they'll go deep in the competition. I still think they'll be very, very difficult to beat, but I don't think what England fans are wanting and expecting from a free-flowing football point of view is going to click. The fact that we haven't seen it in the first two games, I think, is going to be indicative of what you'll see as we go into this competition. I think England's best chances of progressing into this competition will be difficult to beat. Try keep clean sheets and then hope that Harry Kane and whoever plays top end of the pitch can nick you a goal. They're not going to be that side who's going to wipe teams away by 2 and 3 goals.
Yeah, and then pressing is the other side of it, Keith, as well. And Southgate has talked about that they have limitations in how they can do that with physical condition. He was talking about that in the press conference. But then also there's interesting, that stats that are mentioned in the Athletic. And I might just read out one passage from it where they talk about the numbers make for stark reading. In terms of passes allowed per defensive action, it was England's second most passive display. And this is in their last game against Denmark. Most passive display in a major tournament game under Southgate. Over 25 Denmark passes before defensive action. Compare that to World Cup 2022, Euro 2020 and World Cup 2018, where England allowed on average 10, 17 and 13 passes before making defensive actions. And I think some of the analysis from Michael Cox, who's a sort of tactics writer, he pointed out that I think Foden's positioning in terms of where he presses has a sort of knock-on effect, and same with Harry Kane, has a knock-on effect down through the field as well.
Yeah, and look, we can highlight the front lads and say that they've had tough long seasons and maybe they don't have that. They're obviously fit, but maybe they don't have that sharpness just to go zipping after people. Kane's had a very tough season, Foden a long tough season, Bellingham the same, Saka much the same. So we can maybe forgive that, but it's a unit. The whole unit has to move up the pitch. And when you look at John Stones, had an awful lot of injuries this season. He's in and out of Manchester City. I'm not too sure he wants to press up the pitch and stand on the halfway line because he's that little nervous. Will I, won't I? Mark Gay, he's still a newcomer to this English team. Does he want to stand on the halfway line? Not really. I think the only one of that English back four who's comfortable on the halfway line is Kyle Walker. The rest of them are thinking, I don't want to be running back because I'm not the quickest. Kieran Trippier, an old mate of mine, not the quickest over the ground, so he doesn't want to be too far up the pitch. And again, like what Joe was saying about just shoehorning people in, you're shoehorning a right back into the centre of the pitch, you're shoehorning another right back into the left back position. And a lot of people are, they're saying, England this and they haven't got the width and Trips playing left back is really killing them. People are saying to me, oh, well, Luke Shaw comes back, it'll be grand. Luke Shaw's become a wall beater all of a sudden since he's been injured. He hasn't played since February. And even then, he wasn't setting the world on fire. But it's in everybody's mind that Luke Shaw will come back and natural left foot or give us that width. And all of a sudden, England will click. I don't think it's going to be that easy for the English whatsoever. And I think the English public need to just reevaluate what they think. Because I think Paul is right. I do think they'll go deep. I think we're all anticipating the semi-final with France. And if they win that, it's a toss of a coin if they can go and win the final. But I think it's going to be hard, tough yards, running, bodies on the line. There will be times when it will click and it'll be neat, sexy little football. But in terms of going blowing people away 2-3-0 that you expected to see, it's not going to happen because a lot of those lads are tired. They've had long, tough seasons and the little bumps and bruises, they start to feel it. And you get into the 60th, 70 minute of games, you start to feel it that little bit more. So I expect England to go to this at minimum the semi-finals. But again, the early indicators within the group are, it's not great. And I don't understand, Gareth Southgate, why would you play Trent Alexander-Arnold in there for the first two games? Because I think we all agree that when they come up against the big boys, he's not going to be in there because defensively he's not up to it. So if he played in the first two games as he has, if he'd have played really, really well, he's just given himself another problem. And if you're Conor Gallagher sitting on the bench or Kobe Mainoo or even Adam Wharton and you're thinking, there's a right back playing in front of me. What am I doing here? And I know they're probably young lads and they're good lads and they don't want to be given out. But if I was on the bench and Trent Alexander-Arnold was playing in front of me, I'd be thinking, what's going on here? What's the problem? And again, I've had it with managers where they say you're a clever player, Keith, you want to play in the number 10 position. As a left winger going into the number 10, you have your back to goal. There's people coming in and you're all from all angles. It's not the same as on the wing. As Paul says, when you have your back to the end line, there's nothing coming there. You're looking at everything. You can see the whole picture. Trent can't anymore. And Trent's forced touch lets him down an awful lot. He likes that little loose touch in the middle of the pitch. I think if any decent team was coming and Trent was playing in the middle, you'd say, just stay around him, lads. He will give you a chance and we can go and hurt this English team. So I don't know why he played there in the first two games. He wasn't good enough to get into the team as a right back. He's probably a third choice right back. So why he was shoehorned in as a defensive midfielder, I don't know. His passing range is unbelievable, but for 99% of the game, he's not going to have the ball, Raf. So he has to defend in some capacity, and he seems unwilling or unable to do that.
Yeah, no.
I'll tell you why he's been playing, Raf, and he's been this stubbornness of Gareth Southgate, and I think we've seen it throughout his tenure as a manager. The one thing, though, that England fans hope, because he dropped some of the established players and the players he's stuck with so often when he named the squad, I think there was a hope that, he might not be as stubborn and we see something a little bit different. But this Trent Alexander-Arnold as a midfielder experiment was started by Gareth Southgate 12 months ago. And I think because it's been his project, that is the reason he's been keen to stick it out in the first two group games. But as you mentioned, Keith, and I've heard so many pundits, tear his defensive ability apart, Trent Alexander-Arnold. If we do get to the 16 or quarterfinals and you come up against the France and you're going to be under pressure defensively all match, then, would Trent Alexander-Arnold be the right player for that position anyway? But yeah, I think the only reason has happened is the stubbornness of Gareth Southgate as a manager.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, there's been a bit of a disconnect in terms of what's helped England so far. They've started well and they've taken the lead in all their games, but then they have this drop off and they don't look quite as sure on where that's coming from. Southgate is saying like he's not instructing his players to drop back so much there, and Kyle Walker in his post-match interview was kind of interesting, in which he suggested he had a slightly different idea in terms of where that drop off comes in terms of the pressing side. So, Joe, what's your sort of interpretation of that? Because it does seem there's like mixed messaging a little bit.
Yeah, I actually think they're missing a bit of a leader on the pitch, and you can look at the spine of the team, and people say Declan Rice is a leader and John Stones experience, but I think Harry Maguire and Jordan Henderson in there are big characters, big leaders, and particularly Declan Rice. I think his best games for Arsenal this season been when he's had the experience of Jorginho alongside him, almost like directing him, telling him where to be and pulling him back and giving Declan Rice a bit more freedom. And now he's being expected to be that man to sort of, commandments from the centre of midfield. I don't think that's necessarily happened. And, England, they've scored and then they've sat back. Again, it's something that we're familiar with seeing in Gareth Southgate's tenure. I don't think it is coming from the manager. He spoke about it in one of his post press conferences. Look, I want the team to keep going forward and get a second goal. So it's clearly something that's happening on the pitch psychologically. And again, Keith and Paul will be better at telling you what that might be than I am. But yeah, it's worrying, because particularly when you get an early goal, you're then giving the other side the emphasis. And England paid for it against Denmark, didn't they, when they got the equaliser, and then they never really wrestled it back, and Denmark were on top for the rest of the match.
Yeah, and now before we let you go, one final point on England, Joe, and this is in terms of the longer term. As I think everyone, as Keith has said, there's every chance England go on and get to the, a semi-final, potentially further. Under Southgate, they've done brilliantly. Quarterfinals is actually the worst they've done, and that was at the last World Cup. But in each of those tournaments, it seems like the first true big hitter that they've met has generally been where the journey has ended. Obviously, the last Euros, it was in the final against a decent Italy team. So is that still a concern? I mean, there's already problems against some of the weaker teams now. But the fact that they haven't proved at a major tournament in terms of beating a major nation, how concerning is that?
Yeah. I mean, they got past Germany, didn't they, at the last Euro? So I think that would have been a hurdle overcome. Maybe going up against a better team will bring the best out of England, and maybe this team will be suited to playing on the break. So I think England are expected to dominate possession, but they do have options where they can set up. It might require Watkins and more pace on the wing, so instead of Foden, a Gordon. But I'm not worried about that, because I think they have defensively quite sound. It's just going forward. I mean, I can see England taking one of the tougher nations to penalties. Again, Italy, they lost by penalties, didn't they? Let's not forget that. But being able to kill them off, the signs we've seen so far are worrying. And like Keith and Paul have both said, I think it'll be 1-0, 1-1, penalty shootout. I think that is England's path to victory, which is so disappointing when you see the talent in the squad and the attacking talent in the squad. I mean, you're talking about the Premier League's player of the season in Phil Foden, all-time goal scorer in Harry Kane, Bellingham, one of Europe's player of the season, Saka, who had a decent season helping Arsenal challenge, and just the starters. You're not even naming Cole Palmer and Gordon and Eze. So I think that's the big disappointment for England. But it might be just they end up scraping through, and hopefully penalty shootouts from an England point of view will go their way.
Yeah, we'll see how far they get on. Had you factored in terms of your prep, in terms of your travel time and everything? Had you prepped for the entire month, or were you kind of quite unsure?
I mean, if England don't know the group, that throws a couple of spanners in the works. And if they finish third, then we won't know where we're going until after the group stages finish. So we've had some long journeys. The 8-hour one from Munich up to Gelsenkirchen in the car was the longest so far, but I'm it, and the atmosphere has been brilliant out here. The colour, fantastic. The Tartan Army, they have been amazing to spend some time with. I hope and qualify for the next one just so I can spend some further time with the Tartan Army. And Germany have done a great job so far of hosting it. They know how to handle these big events, and despite a couple of isolated incidents, I think the tournament has been a big success so far.
All right. Well, anyway, Joe, we'll let you continue your journey anyway. I know you're covering quite a lot of ground. So, Joe Rawson, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, so that is Joe Rawson of Sky Sports there. And before we carry on into League of Ireland, a couple of other Euros matters as well. And Paul, let's talk France. Obviously, Kylian Mbappe, who was sporting his mask but didn't come on against the Dutch. He did play in an hour-long behind closed doors friendly against Paderborn's under-21s during the week or just over the weekend. And but at the same time, did France miss him clearly against the Dutch? I would imagine yes, but they also had these moments where they seemed to be trying to walk the ball into the net, and if Griezmann was able to get the ball out of his feet, they probably would have won that game. And that's notwithstanding the disallowed goal that the Dutch had as well. Xavi Simons' one. Yeah,
you would have thought so. I think Deschamps, when he reflects on the two games, Raf will still be relatively happy with how things have gone. You would like to think as they progress into the competition, they'll be a little more efficient in front of goal. I mean, if you look at Mbappe's chance against Austria and then the chances that you mentioned against the Dutch, you would expect that as they go deeper into the competition, they would probably convert one or two of them and things maybe become a little more comfortable for them. Deschamps has spoken quite a bit in competitions gone by that clean sheets are your path to success in these competitions, and they've kept two and they look pretty good as a back four can look, and that will certainly serve to them as they go deeper into this competition. But one thing that France are very, very good at is transitions, and when they transition from not having the ball into attack, they've got so much pace and so much legs in the final third that they can really, really hurt you. And I think once they get out of the group stage and they start to kind of go through the gates, you'll start to see a lot more of that from the French team. And if they can just be a bit more clinical in front to goal, they would certainly be still my favourites anyway to go on and win that competition, just because they've got such a good back four. You've got Kante and Tchouaméni in front of that give you such good protection. And it's almost as if Deschamps says then to the front 4 or 5, go create, go be, in link with one another and see what you can do in the final third. And typically with the quality that they have, that's enough to get them through games and over the line. So I just love the balance that they have to their play. We just spoke about England and how they seem to be kind of fitting people into a formation just for the sake of getting names onto the pitch. The French have a lovely balance about their squad, really strong back four, that foundation in midfield, and then that pace in attack that can just be so lethal. You've obviously then got the likes of Giroud who can come off the bench and offer you something a little different. So they look good to me, Raf. I think Austria are probably a team that we all underestimated about how good they've been. A point against the Dutch, Deschamps would have taken, and Poland look as if they've come off at a level or two over the last couple of years. So France will have no problems probably coming through top of that group. And then once they get into knockout football, they've so much experience. I mean, 2 World Cup finals in a row. The Euros, when they got knocked out against Switzerland, was a little bit of a blip. I don't think you'll see that again. I would fully expect that France will go deep into this competition. And for me, they're the favourites still to go on and win it. Yeah, and then Austria, Keith, 3 points, and the Dutch on 4, they're meeting tonight. Both the Dutch seem to be already through anyway, because they've got that magic 4 points. The Austrians, on the other hand, probably just need a point, but they're living up to their dark horses tag under Ralf Rangnick. They look really good against Poland, so it's going to be a fascinating match either way tonight, on Tuesday night.
Yeah, and I don't think it's, if the Austrians, if they're starting 11, their usual starting 11 is fully fit, I don't think it's that much of a surprise what they're doing. But when you think of David Alaba in particular being missing out of that team through injury, I thought it would not unravel. That's probably a little bit harsh, but I see him as the talisman. He's the captain. He's the one who just gels it all together. And the fact that he was missing, I didn't give them much chance of doing anything. But they've been really good. Went and hammered Poland 3-1. And as Paul said, I think that Polish team's come down a couple of levels. It looks like Lewandowski's, nearing the end as well. And he's the Polish talisman. So, I think Austria have been really good. Sabitzer, he's probably somebody that when I think of Sabitzer, I think of his time at Manchester United, but I think that's probably a little bit lazy, because you've been brilliant at Borussia Dortmund. Largely been very, very good for Austria as well. So Sabitzer, Baumgartner as well is one who I think carries a danger. And Marko Arnautovic, people will be thinking about him at West Ham and how much time has passed from here to there. Has he still got it? He's one of those who just seems to always turn up for his country and play really well. And he might not always score the goals, but he's one of those that will he's a handful up there. He can sometimes get the bottom lip out and look disinterested, but if you keep getting the ball into him, eventually something will happen. So I like that Austrian team in terms of going on and winning it, doing something. I think they're a million miles away from that, Raf, but I think it's all relative. And I think Ralf Rangnick in particular, since he's come into that Austrian team, I think they have a bit of a backbone about them, a bit of a spine. They're hard to beat, and they have a little bit of stardust with one or two players. So yeah, I think getting out of the group is something they'd be hopeful of doing, and that's probably a little mini victory in itself, just getting out of the group. So yeah, I think they're right on track for what they should be doing, Austria.
Yeah, and now if you miss any of the action, of course, you can watch highlights on the RTÉ Sport YouTube channel and also on the RTÉ website as well. We'll have short highlights of every single game from the tournament. And we're going to touch on the League of Ireland, but first on the women's side of it, the Avenir Sports All-Ireland Cup quarterfinals were taking place with Shelbourne, Shamrock Rovers and Wexford, who have reached the semis after beating Athlone, Peamount and Linfield respectively. And then there's also Galway United and Treaty United still to play a quarter-final as well. But the draw for the European games for the League of Ireland men's side have also taken place, and that was last week. Champions League ties taking place on the 9th and 10th of July and 16th and 17th July, the first round ties. Shamrock Rovers are meeting Vikingur Reykjavik in the first round. They are the Icelandic champions, and last year Rovers lost to Breidablik, who are neck and neck with Vikingur at the top of the Icelandic table after about a dozen games. And the winners will take on Sparta Prague in the second round. Sparta Prague obviously being the Czech side who met Liverpool in the Europa League last season. And the losers will then drop down to the Conference League second round to face either FK Borac Banja Luka of Bosnia and Herzegovina and KF Ignatia of Albania. And there's only 50 away supporters who'll be able to attend the Vikingur game. And the first leg, that is due to the stadium size, which is reduced to a 1,000 seated capacity. And on paper, Paul, I mean, last season, Shamrock Rovers were stung by Breidablik, as I mentioned, when there was a bit of expectation maybe they would be able to get past the first round. And it's a tricky tie, but also the fact that Sparta Prague are waiting in the second round makes it difficult as well, going any further than that.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, if Shamrock Rovers were to qualify for a group stage, winning the first round of Champions League is very, very important, just to kind of increase your chances of playing less games and advancing as much as you possibly can. Breidablik were definitely a surprise last year with the standard that they were actually able to produce. And I thought over the course of the two legs were very, very strong, Raf. And if I'm not wrong, they won both home and away in that. So definitely caused Shamrock Rovers a surprise. I think, if you're looking at Rovers and reflecting on kind of the first part of the season that we've seen, if they are to progress past any round in Europe, they're going to have to be a hell of a lot better than they've been in the league. They've given away way too many goals and sloppy goals, so we probably haven't seen them given away in previous campaigns gone by, and probably haven't shown the same sort of spark or creativity when going forward. Now, some of that is down to personnel being out, the likes of Rory Gaffney, Dylan Watts, Gary O'Neill. They've certainly been hampered by injury, but I think irrespective of what 11 goes out and plays in the league and in Europe, they need to find a couple of levels above what they've produced in the first half of the season. Europe is always a strong test. It's a test on the squad and test on bodies when you're having to travel and you're playing games every 3 days. Shamrock Rovers certainly need to up it, and I'm sure Stephen Bradley would have been saying that over the break. They might hit a bit of a reset, focus on the second half of the season and try build up a bit of momentum. And if they do that, they've got the experience in the squad of getting through rounds of Europe, and who's to say that they won't get past the first round of the Champions League. And if they were to do that, that certainly increases their chances of going a little deeper. But I think levels and kind of going through the gears now is what Shamrock Rovers need to do.
Yeah, and then in the Europa Conference League first qualifying round, Derry City are facing Bruno's Magpies of Gibraltar, and then Shells are up against St. Joseph's now. If Derry City do get through to the second round of the qualifying rounds of the Conference League. They would face FC Copenhagen of Denmark, and Copenhagen, as we've seen in the Champions League, very, very strong team in recent years. Shells also, if they get through their tie, they would face FC Zurich of Switzerland. So again, another tough one. And St. Pat's would enter at the second qualifying round stage, and they're up again. They are drawn against FC Vaduz of Liechtenstein. And overall, especially for Derry and Shells, I suppose, Keith, the route is tough once they get to the second round. I mean, they're going to be definite underdogs in that, whereas Pats, FC Vaduz play in the second tier in Switzerland, but they qualify generally for Europe through the fact that they're from Liechtenstein. So it's tougher, I guess, for Derry City and Shells more so.
Yeah, I think you're right, Raf, in what you're saying, but I don't think, even with the Rovers thing, if you win this, we're going to play Sparta Prague. I think that just comes out of your thinking. You play the game in front of you. If you win, brilliant. You have a glamour tie against Sparta Prague. The same for Shelbourne and Derry. I think Pats, look, if it is, it's one of those little step into the unknown. I'm sure there probably is a little bit of footage of them. The lads will be going through that in the build up to it. But generally these teams are just starting their pre-season or they finish their season. You don't get too much tapes on them. So the one thing I always loved about going into Europe is you have to go and do it yourself. The manager will give you a certain set of things he wants you to do, but if it's not working, you need to be the one, or somebody in the team needs to be the one to say things are a little bit different here. Let's just tweak it ourselves. But I have a sneaky suspicion. Like I'm in particular thinking of Shamrock Rovers. When they go into Europe, they try and play the exact same way they do in the League of Ireland, and that's brilliant. I understand the merits of it from a coach and a manager's point of view. But I think when you go into the elite stage, the Champions League, qualifying Europe, or whatever you want, whatever stage it is, I think we need to mix it up a little bit in there, because we're chasing the rest of Europe in this pretty style of football. And I think Shamrock Rovers over the last couple of years have proven we're not quite at the top table there. So if we can mix it up, if we can harass teams, if we can get after them, make them feel uncomfortable, I think you can win a couple of games in Europe. I think Shelbourne are best place. I know they have a difficult game against St. Joseph's, but I think they're best place, because I don't think, I'm not, again, this sounds like I'm having a pop at Shells. It's far from it. I mean this in a complimentary way. They'll get down and dirty with teams in Europe. Teams will come to talk it. They'll be looking around and thinking, my God, watch this. Like, I thought we were in Europe. And I think they'll Shelbourne, Damien Duff will just put teams on the back foot. If they have the same energy that they have in the league, if they bring that into Europe, that fearlessness, I think Shelbourne could win a couple of games in Europe. And it's just because of the styles of play. I think they'll go in, there'll be a cat amongst the pigeons, and it'll just upset everybody, whereas Rovers will go in there, try and do it in a nice way and probably get turned over. So yeah, I fancy Shelbourne, and I think it's a great time to be a Shelbourne fan. Shane Dawson all the time is talking to me about the Shell stuff. It's their third full season in the league, Raf. They're in Europe, they're top of the league. They've 13 league games left. Could go on and win the league. I said at the start they couldn't, but it must be an unbelievable time. I mean, I'm a Pats fan. I'm in a relegation battle. Do you know what I mean? So it's an unbelievable season from a Shells point of view. And I think if you're a Shells fan, don't get too bogged down if we win this and lose that and this happens. Sit back and enjoy the ride. It's been unbelievable so far.
Yeah, and they've strengthened as well. Obviously, there's going to be incomings and outgoings there, Paul, and they brought in Ali Coote and Sam Bowen. Those ones are confirmed. And then at the same time, Damien Duff's contract is extended, so there is stability. I don't think that was ever in doubt anyway, in terms of his commitment to the club. And then Cameron Ledwich as well, in terms of the younger players, he's also got a new deal. So it's looking bright, as Keith said.
Yeah, I think first and foremost to get Damien Duff nailed down for another couple of seasons was probably the best bit of business that they've done over the last couple of weeks. He's so important, as is Joey O'Brien and the rest of the backroom team, to what it is they do. And Keith makes a really good point around European football, and that sort of approach will be so important. You can see when they play how well organised they are, and they don't concede a huge amount of goals. And a lot of that is down to the work that background team has done with Chelsea. And yeah, Ali Coote and Sam Bowen will certainly give them a little bit of a buffer. A lot of people maybe look at that squad and go, okay, if they are to go through the first round of Europe and they've to contend with an extra 4 games, maybe that's puts a bit of a stretch on the squad. Putting 2 players who know the league inside out will certainly come to the advantage of Duff if he has to, rotate the bodies a little more. But listen, Shells are in an incredible position. And I wouldn't expect that they're going to start utilising a massive squad. I'm sure Duff and Cole want to keep it nice and tight-knit, ensure that they're getting the most out of the bodies that they have in the building. And if they were to go through a couple of rounds of Europe, I mean, that would be absolutely brilliant. But also, Raf, if they were to come out, it allows them then to just focus on the league and try keeping that gap that they have to Derry and Shamrock Rovers. So they're in a fantastic position. It's great to see that they're putting plans in place with regards to kind of nail and keep people down and ensuring that they try keep their best talent in the building for as long as possible. And they are certainly not going anywhere, Raf. They're only going to get stronger, I think, as we go season in, season out. They've obviously had a bit of backing as well off the pitch that's going to help them. And it's coming together very, very nicely. And Keith is also right in saying that we probably are quick to forget that Shells weren't in the first division too long ago. So the journey that they've been on and the rise that they've had is a real testament to everybody involved in that club.
Yeah, and obviously Gavin Malloy, the one major name going out of the club, and he'll be starting with Aberdeen, or starting life with Aberdeen this time next week, so from the 1st of July. Derry City also have brought someone in the shape of Jacob Davenport from Morecambe. He's a product of the Man City Academy, which is sort of like a bit of a trend with Derry in terms of Will Patching and Sadhu Diallo have both come from that stable as well in the past in terms of their development. But for Bows, Keith, Ross Tierney coming back after 2.5 years at Motherwell, and he's also had a loan spell at Walsall as well. That's a big deal for them in terms of strengthening. Alan Reynolds has said obviously that we're going to be incomings and outgoings. Outgoings include Michael Lilander and Sten Reincourt, the two Estonians who had come in at the start of the season. So Ross Tierney, at least that seems to be a good sign of where they want to go.
Yeah, I think it's a good signing. As you said, Rob, he's been in the league, he's played, he's one of those who knows the league. He generally get a 7 out of 10 from him, doesn't really dip below it too often. So I think it's a perfect Alan Reynolds signing. You look at Bow sitting 8th in the league, only Dundalk and Drogheda behind them, and Dundalk look to be the ones who are on the up with John Daly going in there. They look like they can win a couple of games. So I'm sure Pat Fenlon and Alan Reynolds are looking over their shoulder thinking, we don't want to lose too many games, because I think there's the 2 games in hand. Dundalk and Drogheda both have 2 games in hand on Bows. So if they win those 2 games, which I admit is a long shot, but you don't want to be looking over your shoulder if they do that. If they do this, we're under real trouble here. So Bows, look, they've an awful lot of talent in the top end of the pitch. They do. Defensively, I do worry about them. I think they can be a little bit open at times. So there's an awful lot of improvement to be made in that Bows team. But there's such a high turnover of players leaving the building, coming in and out of the building. It's very difficult for any League of Ireland team, in that case, just to try and get some sort of normal feel around it. So look, I expect Bows to be a little bit stronger from the restart. I think Tierney will obviously help that, but in terms of maybe getting Europe, I think that's possibly out of their reach already. I think they're 7 points off Europe, which is not huge on paper, but they need to find a level of consistency, which they just haven't had so far.
Yeah, it'll go to show you, Raf, as well. I think when you look at Bows and you look at Dundalk, the recruitment hasn't been brilliant at either club over the last couple of windows, and you saw that with Bows letting two bodies go during the week. It's very important that they get it right going forward. They've done so much right off the pitch, but I think the sentiment down around Dalymount from fans is that they need to start getting the right people in the building, and Ross Tierney is certainly heading in the right direction in that sense.
Yeah, and then I suppose finally, you can read about this in more detail on rte.ie/sport, but more than 500,000 people have attended games across all 3 of the League of Ireland's divisions, men's and women's, up to the 23rd of June, so yesterday as in Sunday. And the men's Premier Division attendances are up 6%. And Keith, this has been an ongoing trend now for a few seasons now, back to back. And I guess you kind of see it often when you're at Pat's, when you're keeping Oisin Langan company up in the press box, but that there is this growing, burgeoning feeling.
Yeah, and look, a lot of people are they'll talk about COVID and people being desperate to see live football again. But yeah, I take that as a factor, but I genuinely think that the standard of the League of Ireland is getting better and better. And you look at Drogheda are at the bottom of the table at the minute. If you go and watch Drogheda at home, they will try and play a little bit of football. Don't get me wrong, they'll mix it up at times. I love the different styles within the league as well. You look at Shelbourne, a good footballing team again, but will mix it up, will get dirty, will get horrible. Very, very difficult to beat. Galway, 4th season in the Premier League, they're sitting 5th. Again, they'll just throw balls into the box, defend like their lives depend on it. And it just shows, a lot of people get bogged down with the modern style of football. It has to be neat, it has to be progression. We need this, we need that. professional football is about winning. And if Galway are winning football the way they're winning it, more power to them. Shelbourne winning games the way they're doing it, more power to it. It's not all about one style of football. There's a load of different ways to win it. And like I say, I love turning up. You get a great game of football with Shamrock Rovers. You get a different game of football with certain teams coming. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And yeah, look, the one thing I'm delighted. I'm probably a little bit shy in giving it any sort of airtime is the things they're throwing on the pitch, the flares.
Yeah, the pyro.
Amped down an awful lot now, so it's good that everybody seems to have got on the same page. Like, that's not the league we want to be portraying to the rest of the Europe. That's not what we're all about. And thankfully, that seems to have quieted down. But the football, Raf, for me, the individual players, there's so many players now going across the water, going onto the continent from the League of Ireland. And I think now, like, you look at our starting 11 in the Irish team, a lot of them blooded themselves in the League of Ireland. So if you want to get a look at some lads who, there's so many Pats, the likes of Mason Millia, who has been tipped to go on to do great things. You want to have a little look at these lads and you have a look for yourself and think, is this one that's going to be a future Irish international, or somebody who could play in the Premier League, or somebody who could go onto the continent? They're littered all throughout the league. So there's so many different reasons to come and watch the league. And the one thing as well that you'll never be disappointed with, Raf, is there's no VAR. So there's loads of little dark arts within the game as well. There's people standing on toes, pulling the underarm hairs. I love watching all that stuff. I hated being in the mixer, but I love watching it now.
Yeah, and then just before we go, obviously the men's Premier Division returns this Friday with Dundalk playing Waterford, Shells against Galway United, Sligo Rovers against Shamrock Rovers, St. Pat's against Bows, Derry City against Drogheda. And Paul, I suppose the final word on this, I suppose the games to really watch should probably be Shells and Galway, given how good Galway have been, and then of course Pat's and Bows, a Dublin derby. You can never really go wrong with those.
Yeah, and like I mentioned there about Shamrock Rovers and hitting the reset button after the break, I think for the likes of Shells and Galway in particular, it's trying to make sure that the break hasn't halted any sort of momentum that you had before that. But I'm sure Damien Duff and the rest of the Shells be well prepared for that game and know exactly what they're getting from Galway, being physical, not afraid to put the ball in the box and ask questions of that Shells back four or back five, depending on the system they set up with. But it's about trying to just get back to what has been so successful for them in the first 22 games of the year. And what you don't want to do after the break is give Shamrock Rovers or Derry any sort of sniff of being off or dropping points early on and allowing either side to close the gap. So they'll be looking to get back full foot on the accelerator and try to keep things going forward. And for Pats and Bows, it's probably it's on the different side of the scales, whereby Pats need to start putting results together and try get a bit of consistency in their performance and churning out results, because it has been a little stop-start, and the fact that they've only won 7 games from their first 23 is probably a good sign of that. But they had good performances and a couple of good results just before the break. That one against Shamrock Rovers was obviously a massive win, and it'll be trying to build on that momentum for Stephen Kenny and trying to, I guess, put his stamp on that team. And we mentioned with Bows, like the fact that Bows are sitting in 8th has got to be a worry for people associated with that club, and ensuring that they stay as far away from Dundalk and Drogheda has to be the first priority there, Raf, and you try to build from there.
Yeah, and just as before we go, Conor Gallagher set to replace Trent Alexander-Arnold in the England team for the Slovenia game. That's David Ornstein in The Athletic reporting it there. But anyway, we'll be back soon with more analysis and discussion of Euro 2024, and also from all our domestic competitions as well. Paul Corry and Keith Treacy, thanks very much for your time, and also thanks to Joe Rawson for coming on, and also Lukas Vrablik. But lads, cheers.